Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an exciting Ruling on the Field podcast where we're talking about Super Bowl 58. We finally made it. We're going to Vegas. It's super exciting between the Chiefs and the 49ers, a rematch of 4 years. These are two teams that have faced a lot of scrutiny, a lot of criticism throughout the season, but here we are going to Vegas, going to the Super Bowl. There's a lot of new faces on these teams from when they played each other 4 years ago. What are some of the key storylines? Let's dive right in because we've got so much to cover here and what will be a very epic Super Bowl game.
Yeah, everyone remembers the Chiefs winning their first Super Bowl, but a lot of people forget that the Chiefs need to come back in that game. They scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. Patrick Mahomes hit Tyreek Hill on that beautiful corner route. And then the 49ers really needed to readjust the team since then. I mean, a lot of people think that Trent Williams has been on that team for a decade, but he wasn't on the team during that Super Bowl appearance. They've added Christian McCaffrey, and more importantly, they've added Brock Purdy. They moved off Jimmy Garoppolo. We don't need to go into all that storylines, but to me, I'm very excited to see this quarterback matchup. It's Mr. Irrelevant, who is no longer irrelevant because he's clearly one of the top quarterbacks in the league, although Cam Newton might say he's just a game manager, going up against arguably the next GOAT or the GOAT, because on this trajectory, Patrick Mahomes could be looking at his third Super Bowl ring before the age of 30. I mean, that is just insane to me. And this is really where the matchup is going to come. I mean, again, it's all about the quarterbacks. We saw Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, epic game in the Super Bowl last year. They both balled their heads off. Can Brock Purdy come from behind if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs take a lead? And on the other side, the Chiefs defense might be the best that Patrick Mahomes has ever had. So, you know, last year he actually didn't throw for many yards. The defense was doing their job. Jalen Hurts, balled out. But this year they're going to be really focusing on playing man coverage in the secondary, which they've done all year, and then really controlling that run game, making sure Christian McCaffrey doesn't run for 280 yards, similar to how Philadelphia was doing it last year. So there's a lot of interesting storylines. But Brock Purdy versus Patrick Mahomes, Seth, I think that, to me, obviously, it's the quarterbacks, to me, is the most intriguing matchup of Super Bowl 58.
Yeah, all season, people put Brock Purdy in this very interesting box where it was like, we want him to be great. We want to give him the respect, but this team is also great. And for whatever reason, you could never, or the media and a lot of fans alike couldn't believe that Brock Purdy was this elite quarterback. And the reality is he threw for 4,000 yards this year. This offense is just a well-oiled machine. They had 4 players with over 1,000 yards beyond the scrimmage line. So there's so much going for San Francisco's offense. And what really showed to me the intangible that you need in this league to win is what you can do in the face of adversity. And in both playoff games, Brock Purdy had to take the 49ers and come back from a 7-point lead and a 17-point lead. Now, granted, going into these games, they were favored to win, and no one really expected them to ever be trailing at any point, but that doesn't matter. When you're in the game and kickoff happens, it's zeros across the board, and so many different types of momentums can shift throughout the game, and how you can handle that, the tenacity that you need to bring your team back in these elimination games speaks so much volumes. We saw it with Patrick Mahomes. That's what started his origin stories when he, like you mentioned, he came back from 10 points against San Fran, had a 21-point fourth quarter. Those are the things that we remember about quarterbacks. And Brock Purdy has a chance right now to kind of set himself apart in these conversations and do what, quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and Lamar Jackson couldn't do in this playoffs, and that's beat Patrick Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs.
No, it's an excellent point. And you look at the roads as both quarterbacks took to get there, and both unfamiliar. Again, San Fran had that one stretch in the year where they lost 3 games in a row, and people were kind of questioning, Brock Purdy was turning the ball over. The whole idea of a game manager is that you just hand the ball off to your running back, let the O-line do it, and make Chris throws, maybe 20 throws in a game for 220 yards, like nothing that's going to wow you or blow you away. But to your point, Purdy came back in both those games. And I think, to me, the Green Bay one was a little bit more impressive because Green Bay was just really going at them. Detroit made some bad decisions that I don't think Andy Reid in the big game is going to make. Those fourth down conversions, they'll take the 3 points from Harrison Butker, which, again, I think they also have an edge on the special teams, but that's neither here nor there. Then you talk about, some of those plays. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, since he hasn't thrown an interception in the playoffs in like over 8 games. It's just been an incredible thing. So, the 49ers are obviously going to try and force turnovers, but Patrick Mahomes isn't going to give you anything. For Purdy, and we saw it against Green Bay and we saw it against Detroit, Kyle Shanahan has a lot of faith in him that he can drop back, throw the ball. I mean, again, did they get lucky on that Brandon Ayuk catch that was, off the helmet? 100%. The fumble, the turnover, you can make all that sense. But Purdy, to your point, showed in those 2 games that they can play from behind, and they can come back and win it. They can stay with their game, run the ball with McCaffrey, and then use Debo, Ayuk, and Kill in various ways. And then for Patrick Mahomes, he's come into this game outside of the Miami game, the last 2 and now 3 games going to the Super Bowl. He's an underdog. Like, Mahomes an underdog in the playoffs because he was on the road. I mean, like, I don't really know. I mean, you look what he did against Buffalo. He was fantastic. Buffalo really didn't have an answer. Baltimore shut him down in the second half. But those first 2 drives against arguably one of the best defenses in the league, he was just dialed in and hitting Rashee Rice and hitting Kelsey and handing it off to Pacheco. If they go out to that early lead again, it'll be interesting to see Brock Purdy do it. But I find it very interesting. Purdy, most of the year, didn't have to play from behind, had his team defense, everything was set up, had to come back in both those games. For Mahomes, didn't play on the road in the playoffs coming into this year, won a cold, frigid game, one of the coldest games in NFL history against Miami, and then went on the road to Buffalo and Baltimore. In my opinion, two of the top 5 toughest places to play in the NFL, maybe with Arrowhead for sure. And they go in and win those road games. And even though Mahomes comes in as an underdog, he said in the Super Bowl media press conference, he's never an underdog. He's brimming with confidence coming into this game. And that's exactly what has led me to believe that this is just continuing on to his legacy. He was asked about Tom Brady and reaching 7 rings. Obviously, this would be 3, but his 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. If he gets 3 like that, I think he can hit 7, Seth. No problem.
Yeah, they're just a team that's built for these moments. And, you mentioned Mahomes throughout his career as an underdog. He's 9-3 whenever he's been an underdog. So this is a guy who we obviously already view him as an elite quarterback, but he loves when there's doubters on him. It makes him play another level. And I think that's the biggest thing with the Kansas City Chiefs in this dynasty that they've created. And it's gonna probably go for another few years, is that we saw throughout the season they had certain mistakes. And we immediately were like, oh, kinks in the armor, they're not the same team. Like, finally, this team is not going to be as dominant as they have been in the last 2 years. But that all gets out the window when they're in the playoffs. And the reality is, I saw this stat, it's just everything that you need to know about the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid and the culture that they have. Throughout the season, they had a 6.2 drop percentage for catches, led the league. Throughout the playoffs, they cut that in half. During the season, they averaged 3.5 penalties per game. During the playoffs, it's down to 2.4. The amount, like turnovers too, they had 28 turnovers throughout the season. They've only had 2 this year. Like, these little things that we sometimes forget are so imperative in terms of how playoff football is different than the regular season. And it seems like, I remember Michael Jordan and LeBron James always talked about how they were training in the preseason for the postseason. There's a mentality that you have when you're constantly going to the postseason, and you expect that, so you know that your body and your mind is ready for those moments. Whatever happens in between there, those little kinks, mistakes, that's all part of the journey. But when you're in the playoffs, you shut everything down and you play your best, and that's what the Kansas City Chiefs do. Honestly, these last 6 years, that's all they've been doing, is when they're in the playoffs, they're playing their best football.
Well, and remember, this is a team in week 1 against the Lions, right? Chris Jones wasn't signed on the team. He was in the press box. He was in his own box, just watching the game. Travis Kelce was hurt. Kelce continues to dominate. Maybe it's the Taylor Swift effect. Maybe just Taylor Swift and him. He didn't get to 1,000 yards, but he has balled out. I mean, 11 catches in the game against Baltimore. He's just been explosive. He's obviously Patrick Mahomes' safety blanket. But I like the point that you made up, like those dropbacks. We remember that Super Bowl. I mean, it was Tyreek, it was Kelsey, a younger Kelsey, obviously, and they were throwing crossing routes 30, 40 yards down the field. Now it's more, I don't want to say dink and doink, because I don't think you can ever dink and doink with Patrick Mahomes, but it's more precision. It's more about those quick dropbacks, finding that one target that's not open, going to the next one, right? Getting Pacheco out in the open field. Rashee Rice crossing in. A guy who I think, obviously, he had a big game against Baltimore with that game-winning catch. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is he going to step up with a couple big plays? Because we know with Mahomes and Reid that they like to blow over the top. And really, that secondary for the 49ers, Chatavius Ward, there's a couple question marks there that they could really exploit. And so I like what you're saying. And to me, honestly, for the Chiefs, that game against the Raiders, where Patrick Mahomes had 2 turnovers in 2 straight plays. One was a pick six, and the other one was like a reverse or a lateral to Pacheco, or a pitch, and it got fumbled and returned for a touchdown. And then the Raiders ran away with that game, and everyone was like, what is going on? Like, the Chiefs are walking away with the division because everyone else sucks in that division. But you're right. They prepared for the postseason. They know they were going to get there, and their game is completely changed and completely developed. And I'm curious your thoughts, because we've talked a lot about Mahomes and the offense, but that defense, I mean, to me, and I mentioned it earlier, it's the best defense Patrick Mahomes has. It might be the best defense in the league. And I think of that one play they made against Miami where they did a fumble of Tyreek Hill in the regular season, and they reverse lateraled it for a touchdown. Like, they just seem to have had everything going, and they've been healthy for the most part. A couple injuries here and there. Willie Gay, questionable but probable to play. What do you think about what Steve Spagnuolo has done, and especially that defense? Like, what stands out to you? Because that is a huge moment. They play man-to-man a lot against a 49ers defense that likes to exploit man-to-man coverage.
It's nothing short of brilliance, what I'm seeing with this defense. It is honestly like what we're seeing when these high-powered offenses are going against Kansas City's defense is a completely different look. And I'm going to share a few stats here because, like, I think these are really important to understand about what this defensive clinic has been in these 3 playoff games for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, first, Miami. Tyreek Hill was averaging 112 yards per game. Jalen Waddle, 72.4 yards per game. In that matchup, Tyreek Hill had 62 yards a game, or 62 yards in that game. Everyone else was under 40 yards. Then you go against Buffalo. They held every player on their team under 50 yards when Stephon Diggs was averaging 70 yards a game. And then against Baltimore as well, other than Zay Flowers, who had an incredible game, everyone was under 40 yards. This secondary is shutting people down. And even when Zay Flowers beat L'Jarius Sneed got the last laugh. Like, they bend, but they don't break. Yeah. And everything about what this defense does is the confidence that they have in their man coverage and their blitzing is incredible. But it's also a recipe when you know that you have the utmost confidence that your quarterback will score when you need it the most. There's a certain mentality that incepts in the mind of your defense where you make these big plays, you keep getting stops and stops and stops. You know Mahomes is going to throw it to Marquez Valdes-Scantling to win that game when he needs to. Like, they're that combination that the Chiefs has right now, everything is going for them. And when you go against this San Francisco 49ers offense that, I mean, again, let's bring up some stats here. Like, they have Ayuk averaging 84 yards a game. Kittle, 64 yards a game. Deebo Samuel, 60 yards a game. CMC, 35 yards a game. That's almost 150 yards right there in those 4 players that they're almost averaging per game already. They're going to have to shut down. They're going to have to find ways to stop it. I mean, the defense has looked great. They've held the opposing quarterbacks that they've played. They've only given up 3 touchdowns, and they've had 2 interceptions as well. So they're doing all of the right things. They're shutting down the key players. This will be their toughest test because of how deep and versatile the San Francisco 49ers are, though.
I completely agree. And just to give a couple shouts, L'Jarius Sneed, in my opinion, I think he's the best cornerback in the league. He gave up 1 touchdown all year, and that's including the playoffs. And that was an amazing play that Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir connected for. in the playoffs. Like, he's been fantastic. You mentioned the Zay Flowers fumble at the goal line. Like, he got beat on a big play. Zay Flowers got a taunting call after that. Next, couple plays later, L'Jarius Sneed gets the last lap. A couple other guys, Trent McDuffie. I mean, a guy who goes, well under the radar. He sometimes is their backup kicker. Justin Reid has been fantastic for them. And you know what? That secondary for me is where I'm going to focus. I mean, again, they haven't been great at protecting the run game. Although, and this is a stat that I'll give you, Baltimore, who ran the ball like 57%, 58%, one of the highest percentages in the league, ran it like 28% because they were playing from behind, sure, but they were stuffing the run game. And the Baltimore Ravens only had 6 rush attempts from the running backs. That's absurd to me because of who the Baltimore Ravens are. Now, I think obviously Kyle Shanahan is going to try and exploit that. He's going to use McCaffrey in a bunch of different ways. Deebo Samuel loves to be used out of the backfield. There's so many aspects, but at the end of the day, Brock Purdy's going to have to make throws, right? And he's going to look, and I'm very curious to see like those wide shots of like Purdy in the backfield and getting like a coverage sack from Chris Jones or any of the defensive linemen, because you've got L'Jarius Sneed going one-on-one with Deebo. You got McDuffie going or Ayuk, and then you got McDuffie on the other side in the secondary. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo, let's remember, this is a guy that came into the Super Bowl with the Giants going up against the undefeated New England Patriots and held them to like under 2 scores, right? He might be one of the best big game defensive play callers in the league. And I look on the other side, I know Steve Wilkes, he's got a great track record, and he's got a lot of things, but this is a San Francisco defense that's been gouged both through the pass game and through the run game. So when I look at the defenses at whole, the edge clearly goes to the Chiefs, and I'm just curious, when Brock Purdy's sitting there in the pocket, he's going to get pressure. He's going to get a lot of man-to-man and 4-man blitzes and stuff like that. Can he make those throws? And they're going to have to be precise because we know L'Jarius Sneed and McDuffie love to knock balls out. And then on the other side of things, is Nick Bosa going to be able to step up? Is Eric Armstrong going to be able to do things? Because they were giving up a lot of yards to Aaron Jones and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And then you look at some of the receivers that had big games, Romeo Doubs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, they all lit it up. The Chiefs have better weapons, and they're going to utilize that. So I'm curious, do you think that the edge will ultimately come down to which defensive coordinator steps up more and has the better schemes?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, I was watching Chuck Pagano was on the Pat McAfee show and was just talking about the masterclass that Spagnuolo put on Lamar Jackson, because he just was mixing everything. He was throwing them dime looks, zone, blitz, man, literally everything that he could throw at Lamar Jackson, knowing the type of athlete that Lamar was. And we saw, Lamar Jackson, they only got 10 points in that game. We saw them stifled. They got some momentum by the end, and obviously there was a lot of mistakes they made and the taunting, but overall that defense threw so many different looks that Lamar didn't know where to go with the ball. He didn't know if he should run, he didn't know if he should throw, and that's what Spagnuolo can do. I really think, though, the edge is going to come down to the trenches. Can the 49ers offensive line give Brock Purdy the time to dissect what he's seeing enough to make the right decisions? Because the one thing that I really think that Brock Purdy is great at, and what he's shown all year, is that he makes smart decisions in the pocket. He knows when to check it down to McCaffrey. He knows how to get the ball into his playmaker's hands. And that's what you need in the San Francisco offense. You need that general who knows his weapons and knows how to dish it out to the players in the right moments. But he's going to be seeing a lot of different looks on that defense. Can that offensive line that's led by Trent Williams, All-Pro, future Hall of Famer, can they give him the time where he can settle in? Because what we've seen in these last 3 playoff games is that no quarterback has ever looked comfortable against the Chiefs defense. Now, granted, I would say Josh Allen looked the best, but of the 3 quarterbacks that they went up against, and again, Tua Tagovailoa, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, all Pro Bowlers, all, going to be studs throughout the next 5-10 years in their career, they were all held under a 90 passer rating. No one has gone over a 90 passer rating on this defense. So it's going to be a huge challenge for Brock Purdy to overcome. But that's where I think that game in the trenches is really going to dictate how he performs.
You're 100% right. And you know when a quarterback is struggling is when they go back to the sidelines and they're immediately given an iPad going, this is where you screwed up. Like they're scratching the head and going, you have this guy. And you know what I mean? Like if you're scoring touchdowns, you don't need to look at the iPads because you're scoring at will. But you're right. That Chiefs defense is fantastic. And I think to point out with the trenches, there's an injury status that we got to keep an eye on for the Chiefs, and that's Joe Thuney. He's an all-pro guard, and he's not sure he's going to play this week in the Super Bowl. Like, he's not practicing. He's got a pec injury. This is a Chiefs offensive line that had no sacks allowed against the Eagles, who came into the Super Bowl last year with the most sacks they've ever had in a franchise, right? Like, that was a big storyline for me.
Right.
You know, like, they couldn't get pressure on Mahomes. Now, again, Mahomes has magic, and he does crazy things where he'll go out of the pocket, and he'll run for some yards, and he'll throw the ball away. He's a lot smarter and savvy than 99% of the quarterbacks that are out there. But that offensive line is going to be huge because San Fran does have a good defensive line. And so I'm curious to see how that all plays out. And again, Trent Williams is on that one side, but outside of Trent Williams, and they're obviously run a lot of plays, McCaffrey to the left side, I'm not really sure who's stepping up for the 49ers on the offensive line. But I want to move from, we talked about the defensive corners, we talked about some of the guys in the trenches. I want to talk about the head coaches because, Seth, to me, the guy who I think is under the most fire, or the guy that's probably the most scrutinized, win or lose, Kyle Shanahan. I think this is like a hot seat moment. Will he be fired if they lose? Absolutely not. But 4 NFC championship games in the last 5 years. You know, this is now their second Super Bowl, but this is his third Super Bowl because a lot of people may forget, but he was the offensive coordinator for the Falcons when they were up 28-3 against the Patriots. He still says that he's haunted from that game. Now, obviously, he's going to be calling the plays, and he's got Brock Purdy. Who do you give the edge to between him and Andy Reid?
I mean, look, it's hard to not give the edge to Hall of Fame coach Andy Reid, who is probably going to start putting himself in that conversation as one of the best coaches of all time. And he's probably already there in that conversation. What I love about Andy Reid is that he brings the best out of his guys and he challenges them. You hear it in any interview that Travis Kelce talks about. It's like, playing for Andy Reid changed his entire career because it showed him what mattered. It showed him how to manage the, all of the outside things that he's going on in his world, dating the biggest pop star in the world. He's still able to focus and prioritize his team in football. And he tells everyone about that and what his commitments are. Andy Reid, and we saw it in all 3 of those games, outcoached each one of the opposing coaches, not so much in the scheme per se, but in making sure his players knew exactly what the objective was, kept them cool-headed, and it paid off. Now, I will say what will be a very interesting aspect to, edging the head coaches is that Kyle Shanahan has all of this like pent up, frustrations in the Super Bowl. And between him and all the players that were there when they lost to Kansas City 4 years ago, they remember that game and they have been wanting to get back into this moment for 4 years, thirsting it. I mean, we saw the clip that went viral again when George Kittle, the moment he lost that game, was just like, I will be back here. They want this game. They know how hard it is to get into this moment, and they don't want to give up this chance. So I think that could rally the team. And I think if Kyle Shanahan can find the magic to really inspire everyone in that locker room, they could pull off something that will be, I know they're the favorites going into this game. I think me and you both believe that they are kind of the underdogs in how we're even talking about this. I think they have the chance to really find a way to make some magic.
You hit the nail on the head. And for me, it's going to come to those adjustments in game. I mean, the Chiefs were down at halftime to the Eagles. They were down against the 49ers in that Super Bowl. The only Super Bowl where they weren't down or never came back up was against Tom Brady and the Bucs, where Patrick Mahomes was running for his life. Since then, they've obviously changed up the offensive line. Patrick Mahomes has evolved as a quarterback as well. But to me, that's where it's going to come down to, because there was a stat before the fourth quarter or the third quarter of the Lions 49ers game where Kyle Shanahan was like 0-31 when they're trailing by like 14 in the second half. It was like something crazy.
Wow.
And that was their first win. Now, is that going to be a tidal wave to lead into other things or the ripple effect, so to speak? Only time will tell. But to me, Andy Reid is that in-game adjuster where Philadelphia, I mean, I don't know if you even remember this, but I saw the clip go viral last week where there was a play where it went to Dallas Goedert and it was challenged, or it was under 2 minutes in the second quarter, and Sirianni was waving goodbye to the Chiefs, and Jalen Hurts had to knock his hand down. It was like, no, dude, like there's still half a game. And I think that was like the Chiefs are like, really, like this is what they think. They think this is over. And then Patrick Mahomes gets the ball in the second half, which I will just say right now, if the Chiefs win the coin toss, they are 100% deferring. So I'm not giving any player props, heads or tails. I'm just knowing if the Chiefs win, they're going to be deferring because they want the ball in the second half, because it's a lot easier if they get the ball with 4 or 5 minutes left in the second quarter to game manage that, and knowing that you're going to have some points potentially come out of that, and then having the ball immediately to start the second half. So to me, it's about the in-game adjustments, and I just don't know if Kyle Shanahan can do it. Hopefully from that 28-3, again, he wasn't the head coach. Dan Quinn, the new Washington Commanders head coach, was the head coach of the Falcons then. But he had that experience where they gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter and they couldn't do anything. And Jimmy Garoppolo missed, I believe it was Emmanuel Sanders on a deep play. That would have been a huge play in the game. So it's going to be those in-game adjustments. And I think Andy Reid is one of the best ever to do it. I think if he wins this, to me, honestly, I think he's already in that Mount Rushmore of head coaches with Belichick and Don Shula. You can put, Bill Parcells in there, whoever you want to throw as the third or fourth. But I think Andy Reid is really cementing his journey. And to your point, he does get the best out of his players. Not that Shanahan doesn't, but I think even if the team is down, it's like, guys, we still got half a game to change this. We already did it last year. We've been there before. A lot of these 49ers haven't been there before. Nick Bosa was crying after he lost that Super Bowl. That was his rookie year. You talked about the George Kittle clip, which went viral as well. But a lot of these guys, McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Trent Williams, and you can name about a dozen others, have never been in this situation before. The Chiefs were there a year ago. The entire team, besides a couple, guys that they picked up in free agency or in the draft, weren't there. But they've been playing on the road. They've been playing in hostile environments. San Fran didn't have that. So that's going to be interesting. And Casey's played on that field already this year. I don't know if that makes an advantage, but playing in Las Vegas, they're accustomed to like the locker room and accustomed to like, the field and the environment. So it's going to be one heck of a game with so many storylines.
Look, anything can happen in Vegas. This game has so much that can occur from all of the talent that's there. The experience is on Kansas City side, but the talent, arguably you can say, is on San Francisco side. It's going to be a great matchup. Super Bowl 58, Usher at halftime, Taylor Swift, maybe she'll show up. We'd love to see her there. Definitely showing up. There's going to be stars everywhere. It's going to be Vegas. It's going to be the glamour. It's going to be incredible. We've got a rematch of 4 years ago. Chiefs, 49ers.
You have a final score prediction?
Final score prediction, I am going to say, without giving it that much thought, I'm going to say 24-20 for the Chiefs.
Wow. I do think it's going to be a little low scoring as well. I mean, the Chiefs in the second half, their under has hit in like almost every game this year. So I was going with 24-17.
Okay.
Kansas City. I'm taking Kansas City.
So we both are taking the Chiefs in this game. Will be interesting to see how it all comes out.
Mahomes wins MVP? Or do you give it to if Pacheco runs for 3, or if Kelsey catches 2 touchdowns?
Give it to Kelsey. Put that MVP next to the Grammys. He'll have a great party.
Oh my God, I love it.
All right.
What a way to end it.
After further review, this has been a great ruling on the field season, and we're excited to watch the Super Bowl and maybe break it down if we have the time.
And we'll be back in the offseason with some free agency, some trades ahead of the draft. But Seth, this has been a tremendous experience for me. I'm so excited to watch this game with you. And let's go, baby.